welcome to another episode of the Heavy Metallurgy Album Club. I'm Marty. Good to see you. Appreciate you hanging out with us tonight. And to my south here, we have Kellen from Killing for Company. What's going on, man?
Nothing much. A little special new wave of British heavy metal edition here with Professor on a Wednesday. So
yeah, it's a special evening.
Special occasion.
Yes.
I was called in to substitute since Jim is playing hooky.
Yeah.
Or a specialist, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm like glad he's on because I'm like, I don't know if I have much to say about this one. It's good to have.
I really prefer the term expert instead of specialist. You know, it allows me to kind of cock the nose up a couple of extra degrees while I look down, at the proletariat.
Right.
The professional.
Professional. That sounds good. Let's go with that.
None of this amateur hour over here. Okay. Anyway, so with it's been going well. I was had a very busy work week. It's just my job is very seasonal. So it's like the condensed sort of 12-week period where it's all out kind of crazy. But I honestly, in terms of what I've been spinning, I have not really been in a big metal mood as of late, which is kind of made my listening habits change here. So,
oh God, here comes the Miley Cyrus.
See,
Swiftly.
We lasted what? He's been here a total of what? Less than 2 minutes.
Kellen's already ready for him to be gone.
I'm already regretting it. I'll be the butt of jokes for the next hour or so. Thanks to
hey, you know what you got for when you cut me the check.
Regretting this decision already. But yeah, so listening to a lot of punk. This is a 10-inch from Born Against, some hardcore from the Pacific Northeast, or I'm sorry, Northeast. Battle Hymns of the Race War. This band had always an interesting sort of like blend of humor, but also very political lyrics. I guess it's kind of the story, but anyway, they've got a compilation which is like, I think it's entitled like just sort of patriotic hymns. That compiles a bit more of their work, but this is a 10-inch I've been listening to. I picked this next one up when I was actually with Marty up in Traverse City, Michigan Zone. Negative Approach, Tied Down.
Mine's the green version. I wonder what the color delineation means.
I don't know. Probably just different represses. Yeah. But again, I want to say that a lot of the versions that I've seen, like in terms of streaming options, are in green, but the one they had there was purple. So listen to that. And then this one, I guess, is a more recent release. This 108 or 108, whatever you want to call it, kind of metallic hardcore. I guess it's known as Krishnacore. All of their lyrical content is inspired by sort of Hinduism. This is their last release. They've been around, I want to say, since the early 90s. Another Northeast band, kind of doing a metallic hardcore thing. But I hadn't spun this out in a while. I think this is their last release, back in like 2010 or so. Anyway, so on the way to work, been listening to this one. Anyway, a lot of punk, not a lot of metal over here, but I've got plenty of reviews that are due. I probably that'll be a post-show conversation. So outside of my listening requirements, more punk I've been listening to as of late.
That's cool.
Right on. Logan, how you doing? Killer shirt.
Doing pretty good. Appreciate it. Kind of brought up by a recent video Alan did, actually, where he fell down a rabbit hole centered around this band. And then you guys were talking about British, what happened in Britain after NWOBHM. I think this is one of the things, kind of.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of
and they did it very well. Very well. Yeah.
Kind of took the attention from the metal scene, I think, as far as their culture goes, a little bit into the goth. But I got my Newcastle here. I'm ready to talk about
one of my faves.
About Jaguar. Yeah, I still did it. Jaguar.
Jaguar. It's just Jaguar. It's not wow. Okay. It's not like you got hit in the mouth. It's Jaguar.
Now I'm overthinking it.
Jaguar. You people. God.
What are you gonna do?
It's the Southerners. The Southerners don't know how to talk right.
We ain't too good at speaking. As far as what I'm spinning, though, another success with the album club definitely came last Wednesday with the Incantation stream we did. Mortals finally got my copy, like actually on Saturday, so I've been spinning
Nice.
a whole bunch. There was a recent response video too, where a guy was more talking about the other album, Upon the Throne of Apocalypse. So it was cool to hear his thoughts about our, stream with this album, and I was definitely listening to both and comparing. I think I do prefer this one, but it was cool to get an outside perspective on it.
Both of them are flawed sound wise, but
yes, but this one I can it just feels that much more evil because of the flaws, if that makes sense. And then also tied to this conversation, we were talking about a bunch of bands who were just aping the Incantation sound, and sure enough, over the weekend I found an Incoffenation CD in my used record bin for a couple bucks. So picked it up. It sounds like the final song on this album played for 45 minutes. So it's good, but it's definitely a mood album. This is We Proclaim Your Death, O Lord. So came out in 2018.
Members of Father Befouled, I believe, isn't it?
I'll take your word for it. Yeah,
I believe so.
Yeah. And then was watching a Jeff Gas Mask and Hand Grenade stream over the weekend where he was, recapping the MDF experience again, and enjoyed it. Made me revisit the whole Cynic catalog. So brought out some focus and was actually enjoying even the last two albums, which they didn't click with me originally. Kindly Bent to Free Us and Ascension Codes, but definitely a Cynic fan. Enjoyed hearing about their live performance at MDF. And then finally, hopefully I'll be releasing a video tonight or tomorrow about 20 years ago, 2005. A bunch of albums came out that I think people who are maybe, my age or a little bit older appreciate. One of them, Between the Buried and Me, Alaska. So if you're a fan of anything, core related or the modern progressive sound related, this is definitely for our audience right here. If you enjoy anything with breakdowns in it and synthy keyboards, check out my video coming out tomorrow. But Between the Buried and Me, great band, and this is not quite my favorite album, but it's up there in their catalog.
I actually saw them on that tour.
You did?
Which is not something anybody was expecting me to say, but I did.
That was not on my bingo card. Were you in there? Because they're from North Carolina originally. Were you guys in a similar area?
Yes, I'm in, let me think. Saw them in Charlotte.
Yep, because they were in Chapel Hill, I believe.
All right. Alan, good to see you. Thanks for joining us, filling in for Jim, and definitely this album is your expertise, so welcome. Glad to have you, as always.
Pretty easy one to hop in for, and fun to
no
do.
homework
been on
needed.
Yeah, in terms of what have I been listening to? Well, I could tell you what I've been listening to, or I could instead open up this old issue of Metal Maniacs that Brian Tuck from the Brian Arkham channel sent me for fun. Appreciate it, Brian. It's from September 2008. And if I open it up, instead of telling you what I've been listening to, I can tell you what a certain Marty Richtonen had on his playlist in 2008 because he published it. Marty, would you care to guess what you were listening to in September 2008?
I don't know. No idea. No idea.
Well, let's find out then. We shall jog your memory.
Oh boy, this could be incriminating.
For Marty is, let's see, we've got the Blood of the Black Owl and Celestial split LP. We've got the Hail of Bullets of Frost and War.
So far, so good. So far, so good.
Iron Maiden, Somewhere in Time.
Yeah.
Necros Christos, Triune and Impurity Rites. And wrapping it all up, Sinister, Across the Sticks.
Hey,
so that's not so bad.
No.
You're thinking I was like, Chameleon and Britney Spears and I don't know who else.
Yeah. You were out of your Ricky Martin phase by then, so the coast was clear. I wouldn't do that to you.
Well, I haven't really changed much over the years, have I?
I was going to say that could have been last week's playlist.
Yeah, it could have been. Sinister, hell yeah.
It really could have been. As for myself, too, just really quick, I have been spinning Niles, Annihilation of the Wicked. Had never heard this one before, but found it really, really cheap. I picked it up and enjoying that on first impression. And also revisiting Slaughter Extroy's Winter Kill, kind of a cult underground favorite from the Chicago scene back in the mid 80s. Crazy album with a very crazy good vocalist. Yeah, a very underground cult classic. So those are a couple of things that have been on my spinning list lately. Marty, we know what you were playing 17 years ago. What have you been playing a little more recently than that?
Well, yeah, I've last night I had a lot of stuff to do office wise, so I've been listening to some CDs that have been on the pile I haven't listened to in a while, and Fens Winter got this pretty good price used, and first time I heard this record, I have this and I think their debut mini LP, and that's it. And this is really good. If you're a fan of Agalloch, this is right in the pocket with that style. Very, snowy sounding, atmospheric post black metal. I don't know. English band, really good, solid. I was quite impressed. I'll definitely be listening to it multiple times before I put it away on the pile. But this is one Alan sent me here a while ago. I've heard it. Obviously, we did a deep dive on this band, but yeah, Kill Fuck Die by Wasp. He picked up a copy of it in his local record store. I listened to this thing 3 times in a row last night. This album is great. I think this is a great. If you want to talk about, a lot of metal bands, they dinked around a little bit with industrial. It sounds like it, and it's never usually a sensible union. Somehow Wasp, they didn't go overboard with it, which I think is the main cautionary tale here. But it's a really well written record. The electronic stuff is just kind of in the background. It just kind of modernizes an already great sound. Blackie's a little raw in the vocal department. Mm-hmm. There's some goofy kind of lyrical lines here and there. But man, this record is so good. I was just kind of blown away. Like I said, 3 times in a row, I'm like, yep, just hit and repeat on this and letting it roll. This is a Castle Records, kind of a weird digipack.
Yeah, it is a weird. My copy has the same weird kind of tooth and socket.
Yeah, tooth and socket thing. It's really snug. It works. So
yep.
Thank you again, Alan. It's cool to slowly building my Wasp collection up.
Yeah. Wasp from that era can be a little hard to find, and you're right. They're one of the few bands that when they went in that kind of industrial Marilyn Manson-y type phase, they made it work.
I didn't get that feel. Cool I don't feel like Marilyn Manson here. Did you?
Maybe a little bit, but again, in a good way, which is very hard to pull off because I'm not into Marilyn Manson. But they made it work where most bands would not.
And the last one is another one. The same day I bought the Fen, I got this CD because we got a promo of the new one, and I thought it was pretty good. So I don't know how you say this. Eluviti? I have no idea. But this is Ven. It's a 1, 2. I thought it was an EP, but it's not. This thing is garbage. Hot, stinking pile of garbage. If this came out in 2003. So the band has come a long way. I think these guys are Swiss, aren't they? They're the same area as Celtic Frost. I'm not entirely sure, but I could be wrong there, so don't quote me on that. I didn't look up. It isn't the fact that the music is bad. It's the production is so horrible. The drums sound completely synthetic, like popcorn. I don't know if the guy's playing on an electronic kit. They don't have it dialed in. It sounds just utterly bad, and it really highlights the fact that he's struggling keeping meter and some stuff. But there's a lot of folk elements here, a lot of traditional instrumentation coming in here. On paper, it looks good, and I like the vocals. I like some of the stuff going on, but the sound is so lopsided. Hey, thanks a bunch for the super chat.
Mr. Martian Mellowman.
Martian Mellowman, yeah. Yeah, thanks again. Appreciate that. So yeah, this here, I would say go a little further into their catalog. Don't live on this one. I got it because it was $4.99. So, and lastly, I've been sent a package from Melissa and Alan for Father's Day, and I was supposed to open it.
Now this is, to be fair though, this is completely 100% Melissa. I had no hand in this. This was her 100%. So I don't want to take any credit or blame.
Okay. I was supposed to open it Friday night, but Jim from tonight, y'all know Jim. He's coming up tomorrow from Florida to hang out for 2 weeks. We're having a little get together on Friday night. So I was unable to make. So I'm opening said package now at Melissa's request. And Melissa, I don't know what this is, but thank you so much. You did not have to do this. I hope you know, and I hope it is. It's a Funko Pop. I think. I don't get many presents, so this is kind of fun. Yeah, glitter bomb. Thanks. Right. All right. Get to the bottom of this. Maybe it's not a Funko Pop. It might be. All right, here we go. I think.
The suspense builds.
This is 100% Melissa.
Holy crap. He's broke. I'll have to fix him. The me is severed in half.
Oh no, it come undone in the packaging.
This is holy shit. What the hell am I looking at right here?
You are looking at yourself.
Oh my God. Melissa.
This is completely her. I had never heard of such a thing being possible, but she did.
I need to get in here and fix me.
Can you take it out, or will the price value drop significantly?
Oh, now it's worthless.
It's worth broke. I'm on the collector's market.
He had a rough. Oop. I'll put him back in. I promise. Oh my God. I think we found our next thing we need to sell.
Say, Devin, she tried to get the Halloween accessory, but it wasn't available.
There I am, spitting image, a little skinnier than I am, unfortunately.
Is that a White Claw in your hand, or what are you holding?
It's a guitar. It's a guitar.
Oh, sorry.
Man, look at this uncanny resemblance here of the professor. This is freaking awesome. Melissa, thank you so much. Oh my God.
Rick, there you go, Rick.
Right. Yeah, if Tom Warrior failed on many different levels, yes. Melissa, it is amazing. Thank you so much. Holy smokes. I'll put it all away nice here later, but wow. Thank you. I'm kind of blown away. I don't know what to say, but thanks. Did you get one, Alan?
Yes, I've got a matching set of them.
Nice.
Yep. And again, I had never heard of such a thing. She just came up with, she's like, hey, I'm getting this for you and Marty. I was just like, holy crap, you can do that? She's like, yeah.
Wow.
Okay. So I mean, she had already placed the order before she even asked me about it. I had no input. So she gets all the credit in the world for this one.
Wow. Thanks, Melissa. Holy smokes. Wow. Kind of blown away. That's funny. All right. Well, yeah, I'm kind of speechless, but let's get to the matter at hand. Tonight we are talking about Jaguar's 1983 debut full-length album called Power Games, and a very brief snippet on Jaguar. They are an English heavy metal band formed in Bristol in December 1979. They had moderate success through Europe and Asia in the early 80s during the heyday of the new wave of British heavy metal movement. There's a bunch of stuff here. They signed to Neat Records. I'm assuming this album is on Neat Records. I did not look. Is it?
Yes. Well, yeah, the album was on Neat.
They moved to Roadrunner at some point, and they broke up for many years and got back together. They reunited, and they are split up yet again. So, yes, let's talk about Power Games since Logan picked it. We'll start with Kellen. Kellen, is this your first time hearing Jaguar?
Yeah, it was my first time. Now,
listen, this is so cool. Seriously, holy shit! I'm sorry, Kellen. I'm still.
It's all good. You'll have to find like a way to just situate it onto the camera, so you're keeping a vigilant eye on the chat as you're talking there. But Yeah, I had not heard this record. Now, I do want to say, if Alan had talked about this years ago, I went looking through his channel trying to find this album cover on a thumbnail. And like 3 years ago, you had a video entitled like more aggressive new wave of British heavy metal bands. I thought it was going to be in there. It wasn't in the thumbnail. I tried to scroll through the video and I was like, I swear Alan's talked about this band in the past. And then when Logan sort of approached it last week, he kind of introduced it as like, hey, I'm also kind of a fan of Raven. Like it's kind of be in that world. So I went into this week expecting that kind of promise. And the first track, like, I think it actually was working for me. I bought into the narrative. It didn't necessarily pan out that way over the course of the entirety of the listen. But I think that was kind of the expectation and the appeal. This had been like floating around and I'd seen it, in my Discogs, whatever, cart when you're shopping. So I must have flagged it after hearing like a track or two that you had probably demoed. I remember when, Alan would like hold up a record and there'll be music playing in the background to kind of show it off a little bit. And I was like, something must have worked because I have checked this record out before. I'd seen it when Logan pulled it. But this is my first time actually listening to it this week.
All right. Well, I'll go next. I too have been kind of excited to check out this album because I've seen Alan and, other people on the VC as well talking about this album and this band. And, and really it did not disappoint. I have to kind of come to this realization that I don't know what it is about new wave of British heavy metal that there seems to be some sort of a disconnect with me and it. I listen to it. I enjoy it. I think it's good. But I just know for a fact once this show's over, I'm probably never going back to this record. And it isn't because it's bad. It really it's a solid, good record. I've listened to it. I've enjoyed it. I've air guitared to it. I don't know what is I think part of it is, I don't know if this is this way for you, Alan, but it seems like the people that are really into new wave of British heavy metal may have, an early connection with it. So it might be, to some people, new wave of British heavy metal might be like me to Kiss, maybe younger, got involved in it then. I don't have that connection here with new wave of British heavy metal. It's just, I listen to it and I'm trying to think, what is it here that I like it? There's no doubt about it. I think this is really good, but it's just more of a flowing, driving sound. The songs are more chord progressions and less riffs. There's the occasional lick that comes in that's really good, but it's just more of a mood and a feeling, hard driving, aggressive feeling than it is songs that really call me back to want to listen to again and again and again. And that might sound like a negative strike on this record, but it isn't. It's just me trying to figure out what it is about this style. I mean, why did Maiden make it through? Because their music is far more advanced. There's more riffs and licks than chord progressions. Same with Priest. Priest has got, I think, more of a connection to the traditional NWOBHM style and sound. But they just have, amazing. Anyway, we're not going to go down this super deep rabbit hole, but it was great to listen to the album this week and check it out. Something different, something I've always wanted to hear. Glad I got to hear it. So yeah, thanks for that. Logan picked it. Alan, you're up.
Yeah. So I've heard this album a few times before.
Yeah.
But the album wasn't my introduction to the band. Like a lot of new wave of British heavy metal groups, this band started out making some singles. They did their first single in 1981. This one was on the heavy metal label for Backstreet Woman, which is one of those really ripping fast, kind of early songs in the style that sets the template for what the speed and thrash bands would start doing, a year or two later. Jaguar, you're right, Marty. You wouldn't call their songs like thrash metal. But you can see where bands that heard this would have picked up on the aggression and just found a way to amp that up switch it into more of a riff-based song structure and take it from there. So yeah, this was my introduction to the band back in the very early 1990s. I think the one they're best known for is their second single, which was on Neat Records. They had a new vocalist at this point, Paul Merrill. Axe Crazy is one of the real anthems from the new wave of British heavy metal. Again, a very fast-paced, rocking song, very catchy, setting the template for what's going to become speed metal, being an influence for guys who are going to start that first wave of thrash bands, within the next year or two. And then we get to Power Games, which I've had for a long time. And bonus points to Devin. He remembered the video Kellen was talking about earlier, where I've talked about this before. Power Games on Neat, typically comes on black vinyl like this, but there is a super rare pressing of
Move
it.
over, Witchfinder General.
There's only one variation on this one. It does come on purple vinyl. It's the same kind of shade of purple that Venom's Welcome to Hell and the Crucifixion EP, among a few other things, came on. So yeah, the black vinyl copies have never been a hard item to find. Neat pressed up a ton of them. The purple vinyl is one of those things you can look for years and never find a single copy of. It's a real pain to get a hold of. So yeah, familiar with the band from way back. And yeah, I agree with, sort of the comments some folks are making already. This album isn't perfect. It's got its flaws. I understand why some folks have issues with it. But it does have some very, very strong tracks that shine through. And for me, the good outweighs the bad. We'll get into the details of that as we go. But yeah, it's not, as Devin said, it's not an S tier kind of album right out of the box, but it is a very strong album. And it does show off, the heavier side of new wave of British heavy metal to folks who aren't used to the style, or who maybe think that the style is all, more watered down kind of stuff. This band had the ability to do the speedy and heavier stuff and showcase that.
All right. Logan. Kind of a surprising pick from you, I'm not going to lie. But kind of cool. Yeah.
I've always really been intrigued by NWOBHM just because in my mind it's like the first metal scene that was actually labeled metal. Like in the 70s, there's all these separate things that is that metal? Is this metal? And then NWOBHM came out and they were like, we are metal. It's kind of what it seemed like. And they've always kind of been the front runner for just a bunch of bands trying to champion metal for the first time from the same scene. And I think you can see a wide range of different styles and ways of doing it. And it's very interesting because you run the gambit from these dark, almost proto thrash bands like Angel Witch to a band like Demon, who don't even really sound that metal at all. This is like an AOR album, kind of. I love it, but it's kind of not metal.
I find that really hard to love. I don't know. I've tried over the years, and I had a buddy that bought it back in the day because it was Demon, killer new thrash. You put it on, what the fuck is this? But
I almost picked that for tonight, so I'm glad I didn't.
I remember the song "Don't Break the Circle," and I think Blind Guardian song. Covered it. Yeah,
they did. And then Jaguar kind of falls right in between. And yeah, Alan, your collection is hard to follow up right here. This is my repress, and it's on.
Nope, nothing wrong with that.
A camo vinyl.
Oh, that's cool. I like that.
Yeah. But yeah, they fall kind of right in between, and to me, they embody what the actual stylistic sound and choices of NWOBHM was, which was street brawler, biker gang, disenfranchised youths of Britain, not trying to work in factories and just trying to get chicks, drink, and ride motorcycles. So, and that is kind of what this sound is. And you might think looking at the album cover, it's going to be political or something. There's going to be some kind of deeper meaning. No, they really are just talking about getting chicks in the street life and wanting to be rock and roll heavyweights of the scene. So I just, as I said, it's cool to see who in the scene kind of put their stamp on the metal, universe. Because you've got the biggest bands in all of metal coming from this scene. But then there's really no in between. It's like either you are Iron Maiden and Judas Priest and Saxon Motorhead, or you're Jaguar, which is like a lot of steps down.
That Jaguar's got elements of all those bands you mentioned in it.
It does. It does. But at the same time, I think they just missed out on being able to take it to the next level that the other bands I just mentioned were able to, either through consistency of just releasing albums or from having a more like full-fledged package that, you know, could survive in America, or just feeling more metal, like being able to be embraced by like where metal went in the 80s. Like this doesn't have like the darkness and Satan and heavy. Like I don't think this is as heavy as what like the new wave of British heavy metal that is talked about in like, and is bigger. You know, it's like this isn't as dark and as heavy as Angel Witch or even Satan at times, you know? And it's definitely not as stylistically dark as Iron Maiden, I think. So it's just interesting to hear and wonder, like, why was this different? Why is this not talked about as much and is really more relegated to a niche community and a circle of people who are like, they champion NWOBHM specifically versus just like the wider metal scene, which might miss out on this, but just stick with like the bigger bands I mentioned.
Right on.
Might have rambled there.
No, it's all good.
But I think I was kind of getting into my question too, which is Jaguar is cemented as being a part of the NWOBHM scene, but really, what elements about this album makes it metal, or does it really just boil down to being a part of the right music scene at the right time? Also, do you think bands from the NWOBHM scene that didn't adopt a darker and more metal image and sound were hurt in the long run?
Kellen.
Okay, so first part to the question, what about it makes it metal? Well, more specifically, like I think what's interesting about the new wave of British heavy metal is just kind of like my history with the genre. So the biggest names, to your point, Logan, about how like the largest names within the genre kind of come from this world. So it took me a little bit more digging to find sort of kind of the, what do you want to call it? Like the pub sort of brawler aspect of this music. It wasn't just big name stadium filling kind of tunes, right? So when I first heard like, you know, Sad Wings of Destiny, or my favorite Judas Priest record is Sin After Sin, like there's a lot of blues on that. And it's an interesting scene in terms of like a transformational from the hard rock to like, you know, what became sort of early 80s heavy metal. And I think that's what the new wave of British heavy metal is. And there's plenty of that on this record to me. There is like a sort of simplicity. I don't want to call it like necessarily like elementary sort of songwriting, but there's sort of a sort of straightforward, direct sort of, they're probably, I think I looked at their ages, they're in their early 20s when this record came out. And there's a sort of a straightforward kind of element to the songwriting that is uncomplicated, unpretentious, but is heavier than hard rock. So in that sort of transformational thing, I think it makes it a heavy metal record, specifically one that's coming from the new wave of British heavy metal. So I think like the sound of it meets the sort of criteria that we're talking about. The second part of your question is why, if you didn't adopt a darker image, did that sort of limit the lifespan of the band? I don't know. I think the new wave of the transition from the new wave of British heavy metal, by the time we get to like 84, it kind of feels to me that's when like they're descending the other side of the mountain. I think to the point of like when we get to this particular band, and the appeal initially for me was, you know, you listen to that. I don't know if that was the first track that I heard from this project was Axe Crazy, but there's a life and an attack to that that felt like, hey, this is what the sound of metal is going to be for the next handful of years.
Mm-hmm.
And but the problem for me with this record, and probably why they don't sort of grow in terms of popularity, one is their catalog, but that sound to me is not consistent enough of a promise. And sure, I think image is part of it, but so maybe if they had worn whatever leather and spikes, would they have lasted longer? Sure, but otherwise you'd just be a dude playing AOR in leather, and I don't think by 1985 that would have been attractive to anyone, right?
It's not consistent enough of a promise, and it's also it's not bearing fruits that are really going to go that stand the test of time.
Right. So like there's the thing that's interesting about it is by the time this is 82 when this record comes out, I think the Axe Crazy that Alan held up is 82 just comes before it. Like what's going to happen by the time we get to 83, 84? Like
it's over. It's over.
The train, the train has left the station in terms of speed metal and thrash. And that's just not on this record. I think that's probably the biggest hindrance is in terms of where this band didn't develop is it's songwriting. So there you go. Thank you, Devin. Yeah. But I think that's where this band doesn't evolve. It's I'll get to my concluding thought there, but later on. Okay, I'm gonna pass this off because the chat's having a good time. I didn't. I'll let Marty or Alan. You can jump in on.
I'll let Alan take it at the end here. Let me look at the question again. Makes it, I think for the time it's toying with metal. It feels, I think the attack of it largely feels like a metal record. Is it metal as metal would, in a few years later come to be? No, it's not. And like I say, not bearing enough fruits to really go like Maiden. I'm going to keep going back to Maiden because one thing that they did offer that some, a band like Jaguar does not, they have a good sound. They have a good feel to them, some decent songwriting, but there's not a lot on their plate. Whereas a Maiden song, it goes on these little tangents. There's really cool music breaks. Diano at the time was a very characteristic singer. And this guy, I forgot his name. Paul? Was it Paul?
Paul Merrill, yeah.
Yeah, Paul Merrill. Good voice. It's a good voice, but it's a voice. It sounds like he could have sang for UFO. He could have sang for any other bands in this style in his scene and fit in just fine, but he's not a very remarkable singer. He's a solid yeller, and there's one song that's kind of takes on its Master Game where it has some, ballad-esque. It has some it wants to be a ballad, but it kind of goes into a heavier chorus and stuff, and it does show a more melodic side of his voice. But this for the time, I think this is I feel comfortable calling this a metalish record. I mean, it's in a lot of ways I think it's closer to Motorhead, which Motorhead always kind of walked the line for me as well. Let me see. Also, do you think bands from the new wave of British heavy metal scene that didn't adopt a darker, more metal image and sound, were they hurt in the long run? You know what? I don't know what I'm not a huge NWOBHM guy, but I've heard the debut Angel Witch, the one that everybody loves, and I liked it. I thought it was good. And that was dark, has dark themes. They had the satanic kind of thing going on. And where are they now? And it seems like everybody talks about their first album, and you hear the albums that come after it. I had one of them that I sent to Aaron. It got broken mail, which makes me angry, but what are you going to do? It just wasn't as good as a debut. They didn't have. Aaron says, "I'll fight you, Marty." I just don't, I don't think even some of the bands that had darker themes, they couldn't even get out of their own way. Angel Witch took a lot of time to put out releases in between. It took too long. They couldn't strike while the iron's hot. So I don't know how to answer this question. And it just seems like the bands that made it, like you got Saxon, Maiden, Priest, there's a handful of others, but they made it on the fact they wrote really good songs and could change with the times and still sound like themselves. Whereas, Jaguar, I could see myself in '83 in a bar watching them and be totally psyched. And they just don't have big arena or big theater vibes for me. So, I don't know if I answered the question. I'm rambling. Alan, save me.
Okay, let's see. As far as what makes it metal, I think simply the fact that it is a heavy metal album. There's no doubts about that. It's got the sound, it's got the distortion, it's got the power. I mean, that's where the band is coming from, and that's what they're delivering.
Got the attitude.
If your definition of metal is, going to be defined by what's happening today, no, it's not going to measure up to, Lorna Shore in terms of, velocity or intensity or anything like that. But no, I think there's no questions about its metalness, or even by the time, I think it was at the heavier end of the spectrum on their most aggressive songs. And Aaron brings up a good point in the chat. One thing to remember with the production on a lot of these new wave of British heavy metal releases was not top notch. All the neat stuff was recorded at Impulse Studios, which was a couple of rooms in the back of an abandoned theater. We're not talking high-end equipment or any kind of real cutting-edge technology. And so a lot of these albums, they don't have the most powerful production. When you hear live stuff, and there is a live Jaguar recording from back in the day, they can sound a lot more ferocious and a lot more amped up than they might on some of their vinyl releases. So yeah, I don't think there's any reason to, question their, inclusion in metal. As far as does being a non-dark themed band hurt them or not? I don't think it does necessarily, because plenty of bands have been very, very successful and never really touching on that stuff hardly at all. And that kind of ties into what, Kellen was talking about in terms of where does this album fall? This was recorded in late '82. The album came out in, I think, March of '83, which means it's sandwiched between two things. January of '83, speaking of Devon, you have this came out. And of course, at the tail end of 1983, you have this come out. Now, for those who are just listening and not watching, January '83 is the release of Pyromania. Def Leppard is already, severing ties with new wave of British heavy metal. They already don't want to be called that. They're very much, of course, bent on conquering the world, one FM radio station at a time. But at the end of the year, you've got Slayer's Show No Mercy is unleashed upon mankind. And somewhere in between those two, Jaguar's Power Games came out. And bands did have to start to kind of make, a choice of which direction are you going to go. And bands could be successful in both veins. Obviously, Def Leppard, no one's going to accuse them of, playing into the satanic panic, really. And they did just fine for themselves. I think even if you're not a fan, you can agree that, that worked out well. For quote unquote serious metalheads, sometimes the darker, more satanic-y bands hold up a little better over time. That's an interesting observation, Logan, and probably worth an episode sometime.
But that album's got riffs all day long.
But being all dark and evil sounding certainly didn't guarantee you any success. It just means that there's always going to be a contingent of people who will gravitate towards ooh, it looks evil, and I'll check it out regardless. Mm-hmm. But no, it doesn't guarantee you any long-term success. But Jaguar's big issue is they're one of those bands that, again, they had come up through the formative new wave of British heavy metal years, singles in '81, '82, multiple compilation appearances. They've, got a more aggressive tone, and that had an appeal. But the album comes out in between, metal that is starting to become very polished, very produced, very big budget world tour kind of ambitions, and stuff that's going to go in completely the opposite direction. And, it's not like all the bands in between disappear overnight, but those bands, a lot of them did have to rapidly choose a path. And you saw this happen to a lot of the new wave of British heavy metal bands, not just the smaller ones. Even the Saxons of the world all of a sudden were in this question of, do we go really heavy or do we go kind of poppy? Girl School had to make that decision. They were selling ridiculous amounts of albums in the early 80s, but then all of a sudden they're kind of like, do we stick with the Motorhead sound or do we go with the Def Leppard sound? And so all these bands had to make a weird choice. We can talk later about the choice Jaguar made. We'll circle back to that because Jaguar made their choice for better or for worse. But yeah, I think that's kind of, I hope that answers your question. I don't think they had to be dark to be successful, but I think they were definitely heavy metal at this point in their career for sure.
And you have to also look at 1983, what else came out, but Peace of Mind by Iron Maiden. And, you got hometown scene guys that are on the ascent, and Maiden didn't stop growing and getting bigger until, have they ever? Other than when Blaze entered the band, but yeah.
Yeah, 83 is a bit late to be releasing your first album as a new wave of British heavy metal band. Even if you've been on the scene for those couple of years, by 83, Maiden's on album 3, 4. Your chances of being one of those sort of, top dogs in the field are pretty much evaporated by that point. Those spots already taken by Maiden and Leopard. And so everybody else is kind of scrabbling to see who's going to be the long-running opening act, or who's going to be able to do the small tours consistently. And Saxon kind of already had a lot of that turf staked out for themselves. You're only going to be able to support so many bands long term. You can't have 100 new wave of British heavy metal bands establish a 15-year career near the top of the bill. The ecosystem just can't support that. And when the top ones they get filled pretty fast. These other bands, they do their thing. They can release some cool stuff for a year or two, but it's almost impossible to then break through. And what have you got to do? Somehow you've got to one-up Iron Maiden, but you don't have their management or their record label, and you're a couple of years behind them developmentally. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
Yep. But Marty, more thoughts from you on the album?
Nope. I already went.
Oh, no, you
I
did.
rambled and burbled through it. It's Logan's turn now.
And I realized that, so this question was definitely written from my perspective, someone who is like looking back at the new wave of British heavy metal scene, not from a Lorna Shore perspective, like you mentioned, Alan, but I mean, almost essentially. Like, I think I did decide to go back and dive deeper into NWOBHM past like the Priests and the Saxons and the Ravens, probably because of some of your videos that I watched. And Jaguar was one of the first bands that I encountered. Demon was another one. Mm-hmm. And I mean, truthfully, from my perspective, I was like, I like it, but this is making me think a lot more of like the hard rock stuff of the 70s. And the Jaguar actually makes me think of punk a bit, with like the intensity and the energy and a lot of the songwriting. And that's why I mentioned, I think, Raven to you, Kellen, because a lot of the songs do have that like punk intensity, and like the songs get in and get out, kind of. Some of them do, some of them don't, and that's part of why I like this album so much. But so like my first impressions were like, I don't know what is specifically metal about this. But then of course when you immerse yourself into what NWOBHM actually was, of the, in 80, especially in the early 80s, in like late 70s, then it absolutely is. And I absolutely agree with it. And it's the speed. And I think the instrumentation is such a next level to me. Like the guitar work and the bass work and like the drums are pretty well played. I mean, this is not like a punk or even a hard rock level intensity. This is something different. And I think that's when metal enters the discussion. Mm-hmm. As far as the second part of my question, I was mainly meaning that as we're in the comeback era, right? For all of these bands to try to do comebacks and see, it's almost like a second chance for them to be received, by a new audience. And Angel Witch did it, Satan did it. Jaguar actually,
they tried.
They tried and they failed. I'm pretty sure. I didn't know they had a comeback era at all until 2 days ago, and they released an album in 2014, and supposedly it's a bit more of like they're veering into that heavy metal sound, but it wasn't received really by anyone as far as I can tell. And I think there's something about a band that can be nowadays put on like a package at Hell's Heroes or MDF or all of these like Stay True kind of festivals, or Angel Witch, for example. I've been seeing footage of them opening for King Diamond on his current European run. I mean, like, they're still playing giant shows and stuff, and I think they're probably bigger now than they ever were. Same with,
who was that? I missed it. What band?
Angel Witch. Sorry.
Oh, Angel Witch, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Really off the strength of one record. I mean, my question, Angel Witch definitely messed up with how they released their albums, and a lot of the new wave of British heavy metal bands, I think, definitely stumbled upon getting their second and third, album out, and they changed their sound, and it was mismanaged. But I think for a certain section of our modern metal scene, if there's a certain level of modern day metal imagery in it, they can be more warmly received than if you're just a punk band, a bar band like Jaguar. So that was kind of what I was getting at with the question. And I think even Heavy Load is an example. Like, that Heavy Load album, that's got a bit more of it's got a fucking Viking with a bear on the cover. That's pretty metal. Like, that fits a lot of these scenes, and they had a successful comeback from my perspective last year.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just don't see Jaguar mentioned on the same level of any of these bands outside of someone who's like Alan or Aaron, or someone who's actually a fan or a aficionado of the new wave of British heavy metal. So
I will say, just last week, how you get the reels that pop up, they're trying to push these short clips. It was in a Metallica rehearsal room, and in comes the guitar player for Jaguar. James puts a guitar on him, and he starts playing Dutch Connection, and James is sitting next to him, just losing his mind. He's singing along with it and singing the chorus and shit. It was kind of a cool. I'm like, oh wow, it was just some old guy playing these riffs. They're not hard riffs, but James was freaking out, losing his mind about it. So I mean, the people that are into it are way into it.
That is
like Alan.
That is cool. Exactly.
Yeah. And Alan and James Hetfield.
Yeah. It's an interesting question, Logan. There's a lot of complicating factors to unpack, though. You never know. I mean, yeah, Satan has had a great second run. You're right. Bigger maybe than before. But they also have Andy Sneap to hype and bankroll the thing for them. Jaguar doesn't have Andy Sneap among their alumni. So things like that can make a huge difference if you've just got that one member who did go on to something bigger. Do you have a former Iron Maiden guy in your lineup? That's going to draw eyeballs by itself. Yeah, and Jaguar doesn't have that sort of all-star in the lineup ever. Did you ever just get hooked up with the right label, or on that one right tour, or did you miss out? So again, you're right. I mean, I get your point. Those bands that have that darker imagery, that's something that still appeals to, a wide chunk of metal fans. It will get some more eyeballs on you for sure. But I think there's a lot of other things that could cause a band to just, have a less successful comeback. It can just come down to songwriting. Devin almost mentioned the Witchfinder General comeback album from years ago, which absolutely sucks. That's a band that's completely steeped in all the upside down crosses and gloom and doom, and they stunk that thing up worse than an overturned outhouse. Nobody other than Dan at the Coliseum wants to touch that album. So it can go very wrong for those bands too.
And I will say one last thing. I mentioned Metallica, and some other people have in the chat as well, but listening to Kill 'Em All, it is amazing, mind-blowing how much new wave of British heavy metal influenced Metallica, because they sound like a new wave of British heavy metal band from that era, just a little bit more on speed, I guess. That Slayer record too. You know,
Yeah.
the NWOBHM DNA, I think, went on to create some things that were way better than NWOBHM itself. That's maybe a generalized crappy, not all bands, of course, but the bulk of the bands that came out and put out one song or one single and then faded away. I mean, they went on to influence some really awesome stuff that did go the distance, you know, whether you like Metallica or Slayer or whatever, you know what I'm saying. But all right.
Oh yeah. I mean, if there's no Diamond Head, there's no Metallica.
No.
I mean, there's just not. You know, but Lars followed that band around for quite a while in Europe and kind of, you know, learned what to do when he got back to LA to make that band work.
Yep.
No Diamond Head, no Metallica.
Yep, 100%. Well, let's discuss the musicality and composition of Power Games. Probably not a real long discussion. Kellen.
So yeah, I mentioned it in my opening comments, and you brought up sort of the YouTube reel that you caught, but songs like Dutch Connection, which begins the record, that fulfills, I guess, the promise I was thinking. The other one I wanted to point out with Prisoner, I really like that track too. Both those,
a little repetitive,
tracks,
but a good song.
But I mean, that's what I think they actually sort of capture at least their strengths, right? For me, those are the faster tracks here. And while they aren't the most complicated, or I guess looking back, the fastest, most aggressive thing out, I do think it's when the band grabs my attention. And I do think, like, in terms of the vocal delivery and the actual pacing of this record, they're the most successful for me personally.
Rick.
There's an interesting turn. Like, we get to I think it's the fourth track, which is Master Games. That kind of begins with this acoustic piece, and it feels like they're sort of dabbling in like 1970s sort of fantasy rock deal there.
That's generous. I heard a half-baked ballad aspiration, but,
right. Well,
yeah.
there's a ballad, sort of sung part, and it gets kind of heavier at the chorus, but like, I think that's where it's rooted for me. So I guess what I'm trying to highlight in that comment is, like, you can also hear sort of their influence pulling from more like traditional rock sort of sound. There's some tracks though, I had a really hard time with No Lies. For me, so that song, it has to do with like the lyrical cadence that's going on there, and like the inflection in his voice. So like the I'm trying to find the lyrics so I can bring this up here.
It sounds like Devil Went Down to Georgia.
Yeah. It's 100%.
Oh, that just ruined that for me.
Well,
you're welcome.
Well, a friend came up to me and said, "What are you gonna do?" No, it's crazy about that girl, but she's really hot for you. I said, "Wait a minute, okay, she's right here in her style." I turned it around. She's there to good. Like, fire on the mountain, run, boys, run. Like, I totally thought it was going to happen. And when I first heard this, it's so ridiculous. The whole sort of like way he climbs and descends through those, hilarious to me. So I couldn't get that. I just thought it was so ridiculous that I'm like, where have I heard this song before?
Just missing the fiddle.
I was missing the fiddle during the chorus. I was like, how did this happen? Anyway, so it just feels to me like, it's not Def Leppard rock or straight up AOR. It feels like young musicians kind of figuring out how to write a song. I guess it's just so like confused in terms of its style. Yes, Devil Went Down to Bristol. But yeah, it comes off to me as like young musicians that are trying to figure out their way and like how to put together an actual album. And I think that's like my general criticism overall in terms of the songwriting is it feels not just like they aren't leaning into their strengths or what I thought was, best about this record.
Poor Frank. Frank is flipping tables wherever he's at right now.
I hold to that comment. If you listen to that, Frank, and you don't hear Devil Went Down to Georgia, you're completely off. So anyway, but but I guess for me, it just feels also like a collection of songs. I guess what I'm trying to say is, and I don't mean that like, oh, sure, every album's a collection of songs, but they don't know who they are as a band or what they want to be as a band. I guess is what I come away with after listening to the songwriting. There's too much sort of like fragmentation going on in terms of what their sound is for it to be a cohesive record.
I don't know, Aaron. I think. Oh wait, no, I thought it was Aaron said that. It was Logan. I think Thunder and Lightning blows this record away just on charismatic singer alone.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna rank them together.
Yeah. All right, Logan, you're up. What do you think on songwriting composition?
I think a little bit of I get what you're saying, Kellen. And I think for me, it feels genuine at its heart with what you, and I agree. It feels like a bunch of kids just figuring out how to write an album, you know, and they're doing it within the context of NWOBHM, and it feels like a genuine, you know, reflection of the scene. You know, like when you hear that NWOBHM is really just, you know, disenfranchised kids at, you know, at bars forming bands together. This is kind of the sound I feel like you're gonna get from it. I mean, it's kind of unpolished. It's kind of a bunch of ideas thrown together. When you really do break down the songs, they do sound like, you know, just here's an idea, and here's a separate idea, and then we're going back to the first one, or, you know. But I think that's all a part of the total package that represents, you know, this almost punk-like scene that NWOBHM had in the early years, and I enjoy it. I think it's infectious. I think it's fun, like, you know, weekend summer kind of music. I enjoy the variety on here. I like the going from a track like Master Plan into No Lies. I love No Lies. I knew it sounded like Devil Went Down to Georgia and was like, this song is fucking awesome. I like the lyrical cadence. I like what it's about. He's like, you know, this is how I picked up this girl. No lies. He definitely did not lie. No lies. And it's one of my favorite songs on the album. But yeah, I really like just the instrumentation overall. It is a little simple, but I like the guitar work. It's slick enough to be memorable. When he goes into a guitar solo, I think it's an engaging one. It's relatively on the quicker side. I mean, we're doing like, you know, one bar or two, but he'll go a lot of different ways with the guitar work. And for me, the standout instruments are the bass and the drums. Like the bassist is phenomenal. He is all over the place on this thing.
Oh
yeah, Jeff Cox.
Jeff Cox.
He's killing it on bass and just really filling out the sound of a three-piece instrumentally. Like,
can you hold up the picture? Is he playing a Rickenbacker?
You can tell. I don't
No,
know.
that's not a Rickenbacker. It sounds like it's got kind of a Rickenbacker tone on here, but
he's doing the finger pick though.
Yeah,
I feel like you can tell he's finger picking, which I'm a big fan of that. And just hearing him like flesh out the songs and, you know, move it forward and really make the guitar work more interesting. And I think the guitar playing from Gary Pepper does a great job of complementing whenever the bass wants even more space to roam freely. Like Raw Deal is one of my favorite songs on the album. The whole opening of that track is just almost a bass solo. It's great to hear, and it complements the guitar as it's building to the final riff that kind of, you know, leads into the song. I don't know. It's a fun album, and I think, as I said, it's a good representation of NWOBHM. I do want to mention Paul's vocals on this. I think they're great. I think they're perfect. They're very suitable. They're, you know, they do have a raw kind of feel to it, but then at the same time, he is able to hit a good ballad. And Cold Heart and Master Game.
Oh, dude, Cold Heart. He really does a great job on Cold Heart's his best vocal performance for sure.
I think he can sound as genuine as he, you know, does on No Lies on a song like Cold Heart, you know? So I like the range in his delivery, not necessarily the range in how he can flex his vocal cords, but the range of how he can lyrically deliver, I think, is interesting. And he makes these songs more dynamic by just being there. So, my take.
All right, Alan.
All right. I definitely agree with Kellen on the fact that, Jaguar are at their best when they're doing the faster, more aggressive numbers. And yeah, there's several good examples on here. They open up with Dutch Connection. It's the perfect opener for the album, sets the tone right away. Hasn't been mentioned yet, but track 3, The Fox, follows kind of in that. Yes, relatively simple, straightforward songs. That's what you get in 1983. We're not going to have, overly complicated compositions at this point. The Fox works, as a very high energy, catchy one. Prisoner, Marty, I think you and Kellen both mentioned that one earlier as another good example. So yeah, that's the mode where Jaguar is best. It's the Axe Crazy mode. It's the Backstreet Woman mode from their singles. Some of the other songs do some different things. Some of them do work better than others. So yeah, I agree with Kellen's point that this album is not, consistent bangers from start to finish. It does have some potholes along the way. Not all of them are. I don't think there's anything egregious on here, though. It's not like there's a total candy flavored bubblegum song or anything. A couple of the songs have an unusual structure. Both Out of Luck and Ain't No Fantasy don't really stick to the whole, verse, chorus, verse. Those two songs kind of lack a chorus. It's more like verse, solo, second verse. And maybe they repeat part of the first verse again. So I don't know why those songs are written in such a different manner, but it at least makes them feel a little bit different. I don't think they're standouts on the album. They're not bad tracks either. They at least add a little variation to it. Let's see. Kellen mentioned Master Game. I don't mind this song because it does mix things up a little bit.
Yeah.
Again, is it masterfully crafted on the order of Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner or something? No, of course not. It's not going to happen. But is it put together well enough? Yeah. And does it show off a little bit of a different dimension of the band, that it's not just doing, trying to do fast song after fast song after fast song? I can appreciate them adding something like that to it. What else have we got on here? No Lies, yes. Now, No Lies does highlight one thing that held the band back. And it's not the musicianship and it's not the vocals. It's the lyrics. The lyrics to some of their songs are really, really kind of goofy. You can tell they did not have a future English major. These guys, they didn't even take the English literature A levels. They may not have even taken the English literature O levels. That will mean something to people watching in the UK. It won't mean anything to the American audience. But, Kellen picked out one of the least offensive examples he could have. Let me see if I can find something else. In the Dutch Connection, which again, I think we all agree is a really good banger of a track. But there's a line in here, and again, the song is kind of they had a good following in parts of mainland Europe. So Dutch Connection was kind of wrote for those fans. But part of the lyrics are, where the land's as flat as the booze, and I love your wooden shoes. It's like, damn, that's okay.
Bottom of the barrel.
That's and kind of like Logan said, it's kids still learning how to put songs together. And I think they're doing pretty well in terms of the instrumentation.
So you're giving these kids a pass, is what you're saying?
I would give them a pass, yes. But I mean, at the same time, it is fair to say that lyrically, these are head scratchers. If you stop and pay too much attention, it's going to be like, the hell are you singing about? Some of them have odd messages too, though. It's not all boy meets girl type songs like No Lies. The lyrics to The Fox, I mean, you hear the song of The Fox, you figure it's going to be another, ooh, hot chick kind of song. It's actually, when you read the lyrics, which are not particularly well written.
Animal rights song.
It is. It's an animal rights song. It's actually slagging on fox hunting.
Yeah.
It's just like, ooh, big guy, with your gun riding around a horse trying to shoot a fox. What the fuck does that prove about you? It's like, wow, that's a interesting message. I was not expecting that. There's another one on side B. Raw Deal is one that kind of champions lesser, lower tier bands getting treated like crap by a lot of, like club owners and stuff when they're put on the bill. And they're just like, hey, these bands are there to entertain you and make money for you. Why are you treating them like shit? So there's some actual weird activism that's also happening in the lyrics to some of the songs, which is interesting and not something you saw many new wave of British heavy metal bands do necessarily. So, yeah, there are issues. Raw Deal, even though it's got interesting lyrics, that song's way too long. It did not need to be 6.5 minutes. It needed to be maybe 3 to 3.5 minutes. But yeah, so in those regards, I don't think the album's got, that many big pitfalls in it. There are things that, I can see are weaker than others. It's a band that was still developing. It's a debut album recorded for a small label with a small budget in a very small studio. Yeah, with those constraints in mind, I think it turned out really good overall. But I won't try to pass it off as, perfect. It's not a masterpiece. It's not, a 10 out of 10 gem or anything. It's got its shortcomings. But as I said in the intro, I think the good aspects of the album do outweigh the bad. So that would be my take on it.
Just Kellen sharing some of these lovely lyrics.
Yeah, the lyrics are hilarious to try to read through. There's the wooden shoes is not the it probably makes the top 5 comments you could pull from the lyrics, but yeah, there's some real goofy ones in there for sure.
All right, well, this is kind of cheating, but Tim's whole breakdown on this is perfect. Music composition, simple and effective short song structures, not many riffs here, 3 per song. Bass is the standout instrument with some cool bass lines, steady driving time, keeping with the drums. And really, one thing I will say about this, especially on Cold Heart, granted, they kind of put their most emotional track at the end of the song, which I love it. I think it's a great song.
It's a good closer. Yeah.
One thing that they're doing here is they're playing really hard. I mean, you listen to some of the parts of that Cold Heart, they're down pick and they're just beating on those damn strings. They're just reefing on the guitar. It sounds, go out with a bang. That's kind of the bang. They're really digging in on this, but I like the hard driving feel of a lot of this record. And Tim's right. There was only a couple riffs per song, the verses and the chorus. Maybe you get a music break. I don't even remember a solo jumping out at me here that really kind of blew me away. They're just kind of ambiguous, but you've got guitars that sound like tipsy guys fighting. They might be too drunk to do anything super, super great, but they're really getting after it, and it may not be perfect or tight, but it's decent. It gets the job done. What you do have is a great bass player that isn't afraid to fill in the bottom end and write bass lines to kind of elevate these, not riffs, but these chord progressions is kind of what we got here. They're not, you get the occasional lick, Dutch connection, it's kind of a hooky. There's a lick in there that's really hooky and it sells that song. But you've got a bass player here that is competent. He's got a great tone that really cuts through the mix. And he's lifting up a lot of these songs to be like, okay, that more of that, please, for sure. But nothing really out of place, that the master game. Yeah, you've got a desire here to obviously break up the dynamics of their songwriting in the middle of the album with, some softer ideas, pseudo ballad, AOR, however you want to go at it here, but yet the heavy chorus. So it's a band that's getting things figured out, and they're just late to the party. They're late to the party playing a sound that has been thoroughly masticated by bands before them. So yeah, I don't know. It's solid. It's well written, but it's on the same token, it isn't saying much. You know what I mean? And sounds negative, but it's just, I still like it, but it's kind of calling it like it is, you know. Let's talk about the production. Kellen.
So I actually do like, to your point, whether it's the performance of the guitarist or the actual sort of production, I get the impression listening to this that production was limited in terms of access, studio, etc. Like, doesn't sound like a incredibly well produced record, but the guitar tone I really enjoy on this.
Mm-hmm.
I think it sounds like if the individual, you know, had, let's say, a kind of skill set to play a bit more straightforward sort of speed metal, if you had that sort of technical ability on this guitar tone, I think this would be a pretty ripping record overall, just in terms of the guitar performance. He just doesn't have the technical proficiency, and the overall songwriting of this band isn't there. It's just a little bit too simple. So, but the actual sound of the guitar, I think, is great. To your point, the bass does have some like interesting sort of busy moments where you have such sort of simple chord progressions. He can really play around in there. And it's a little bit more on the mid side. Like, it doesn't say, it's not a heavily distorted bass sound at all. But because it is a little bit on a higher register, you get clarity in terms of all the different notes he's playing. Drums sound, you know, it's timekeeping, but they sound small. It's not the highlight of the record at all. For how they're placed within the mix. The vocals, to me, like, I think actually they sound solid on this record in terms of how loud they are, where their placement, how far they are in front of the rest of the band. So for as limited as the production here is, you know, I just in comparison, I heard afterwards, like just when I was streaming it, they had a glimpse into what Axe Crazy was. I'm guessing it's from the single that they've added into this sort of streaming version of Power Games. But that sounded much more lively. This sounds a little bit sort of quiet and repressed in terms of the mix by comparison. So that probably kind of cuts in, I think, to some of the energy in this record. So there's not a lot of great things necessarily about it, but there could have been sort of potential if there was songwriting that sort of went along with it.
All right, Logan.
Yeah, I mean, how could you not have this production in 1983 on Neat Records? I think it adds to the vibe of the overall album. To me, this album is genuine and earnest, and the production, I think, mirrors that. It does do the guitar to me a little disservice at times. Like, there's some guitar solos and like riffs that I think could have been a little bit cleaner and would have sounded better. Like the guitar solo on Master Game, I think sounds great, but it's very high register, and you kind of start to lose it like a little bit with just where it's at in the production and the mix. And then I do wish the guitar tone did have a little more weight and didn't sound as thin at times. I think that would have, are they playing only 3 riffs? Yeah, but I think they're good. They're good riffs, and I think they would have benefited from being a bit thicker in the mix. So that's one complaint. The other for me is the drums. The snare sounds good, but I miss the bass drum a little bit. Like it gets a little washed out. It's on the lower end, and sometimes you can't hear it as well. But then there's
no attack. You can hear the thump, but you can't hear the attack.
Yeah. The padding. But there's like these drum breaks, where it's just the drummer playing. There's a couple songs that have that, and it sounds good. It's just when the whole band is playing that it kind of just gets lost in the mix. And honestly, some of the cymbal work is similar. To me, what saves the production, I mean, besides the fact that it just fits the album, is the bass. The bass, I can't praise this enough. The bass sounds awesome. He's perfectly placed in the mix. You can follow him along the whole way of the album. He adds a lot to the songs and to the songwriting, and it's just something fun to listen to as you're going through, and like certain sections of the album where it's slower and there's not as much going on. That's when the bass really comes alive, and the production lets that happen. I think the vocals by Paul also sound great to me, and I think if they had polished him up too much, it would have lost the vibe that they're going for. And so even though I'm complaining about it, I don't think I would fix too much with the production outside of maybe just the guitar a little bit, but that's it.
Alan, production.
Yeah, even though I've pointed out that it was a pretty small budget kind of affair, studio with limited capabilities, the production still works pretty good for this album. I agree with Kellen. The guitar sound, that they're pulling out works really good. Someone, I think it was Zorlock in the chat earlier, mentioned this album feels a little bit like Savage, Loose and Lethal in terms of its sound. And it does have a little bit of that kind of ebony label sound that they put on Savage and Grim Reaper and Chateau and a lot of the other bands that were on the ebony label. So it's got that kind of guitar tone to it, which adds, a little bite to it, which I like a lot. The vocals, are well placed in it. Yeah, I can agree. Some of the drum stuff is a little bit buried. It's not going to win awards for clearest production, but it doesn't need a super clear production to be effective either. So despite limited resources, it still works out okay. Short and simple. I like it.
Yeah, I've got no real problem with the production either. I mean, you can tell it's not a huge budget, but they got kind of a live, raw sound, which I think really suits this band well. Logan is right. There isn't a lot of attack on the kick drum, but you can hear the whump of it. You listen to it on headphones. You can feel it. A bulk of the production went to the drums and the bass. The bass sounds really good on here. Guitars, I don't mind. They're not offensive to me, but there is a buzz to them that the buzz is there, but it isn't really jumping out. They kept it a limit on it. So I don't know. There's nothing really offensive here for me on the production. It sounds like a good, solid live production, which a band like this, let's face it, you get Peace of Mind came out this year. I mean, come on, it's not going to make a dent. So you might as well just put out a good, solid record. It is what it is. Least favorite songs. Logan.
All right. Yeah. I really am a fan of how this album opens. The first three songs, Dutch Connection, Out of Luck, The Fox, they fly by. They just there are probably 8 minutes in total and feel like less. And that's really like the punk energy that I'm talking about. It really is a great introduction to the album. And then you get to my favorite song on the album, Master Game. I mean, to me, this song, I love the chorus. It's so, to me, it's catchy, it's hooky, it's powerful. I like the dynamics. I get that maybe it's, I love this song. It feels genuine. I like the guitar solo and the instrumental break that comes in the second half and really builds it back up to the chorus. It's simple, but to me, it's effective. And I think it shows the strength that Jaguar has with their sound. And then it goes into No Lies, which I already said I like this song. Like, I like the fact that it goes from, Master Game into No Lies. Like, that's just, you're going to get whiplash from that, like that vocal cadence shift right there. And I just like that they're right next to each other. It's, it doesn't make any sense, but to me, it's part of the deal that this album is. And yeah, the lyrics are ridiculous and it's just a drunk tale, but it's fun. It's stupid. I enjoy it. I like the closing 3 tracks too. Ain't No Fantasy, Raw Deal, and Cold Heart are all great. Ain't No Fantasy has just this song structure that doesn't make sense because it's just a verse and it's just an outro jam. Like, that's it. There's nothing else to it. But the lyrics on Ain't No Fantasy is like him telling this story of how he's going to be he wants to be a rock god to his girlfriend, I guess. And, rock and roll ain't no fantasy. It's going to be real. I guess it didn't end up happening, which is a bummer. But like it feels, it feels very much 80s and of this scene, and I like it. And then the guitar solo for it is great, and I think ties it in nicely. And just the fact it's a quick like little idea sprinkled in there. And then Raw Deal is my second favorite track on the album. Instrumentally, I think it's the best song. I like the build up to it. It lets the bass go crazy in the first couple minutes. And then lyrically, I mean, Alan, you already talked about the lyrics. I like what it's about, the day-to-day struggle of being a band trying to make it and kind of not catching a break. It's a raw deal wherever you go. Mm-hmm. And then, the closing track, Cold Heart, also a big fan. The one song that maybe I'm not sure if I enjoy is Nowhere to Run. That's just the one that feels a bit meandering and it doesn't really go anywhere. It's like these two distinct ideas that just don't mesh. So it kind of sinks it a little bit in the middle there for me. But minor complaint for the track listing.
All right. Kellen.
Yeah, like I mentioned, I agree with Logan that this album kind of starts off right from Dutch Connection, Out of Luck, and The Fox. All of those, I think, just like pop, pop, pop. And one of the things where you kind of have to pay attention because they do go by so quickly. There isn't a great amount of variation between the three of them, but all of them are pretty solid. And that moves straight into Master Game. I do like the sort of change in pace and style for this song. But that moves into No Lies, and I don't know what is wrong with Logan on this one. That is it is just like a comedy track every single time for me. I can't unhear it, and the lyrics don't help. And I don't know how like they came across thinking that was a good idea. But that is my least favorite song here, just because it feels like such a blatant sort of like misstep. The parts that I also will kind of be a little bit critical. I don't like the pacing of the record. I think
it's totally front stacked.
It loses steam, and like once you get Run for Your Life for me is a little bit just sort of like stagnant. It's the first real like, hey, where are we going here? This doesn't turn into anything. And while we get to Prisoner, I think that picks it up a little bit. I can see where Logan's point is on Ain't No Fantasy, Raw Deal, and Cold Heart. It's just all of them feel sort of like, I think Ain't No Fantasy is the one that kind of reminded me of like a Swing It Black Sabbath. But they just get bogged down in sort of less than spectacular songs towards the back end of this record for me. That's like another sort of how this album plays out as a full listen. I think the track arrangement is a little bit strange and leads to a certain fatigue on the back end of it. I just kind of got bored. It was listening for the first 10 songs. So when we got to, the added single of Axe Crazy, I was like, oh, hey, where'd this come from?
Yeah, that's a good song.
Only to realize that it was just an add-on in the streaming I was listening to.
Yeah.
And it wasn't part of the record. So I like the opening 3 tracks. I bet moves into Master Games, which I think is a good addition, but I think the back end of the record kind of suffers.
All right, Ellen.
All right. The real correct answer to this question is that favorite songs are all the songs on this album, and least favorite songs are all the songs on the follow-up album, which Logan has, if you want to blow him up there. Yeah. A year later in 84, Jaguar was picked up by Roadrunner and released the album that Logan is holding called This Time.
They suck.
And if that cover doesn't set off every warning bell in your brain, you need to recalibrate, because there is no redeeming quality to that release.
It's like the reissue of Recaputrefaction that Earache did of Carcass.
with the little thin strip, yeah.
But with a leopard in there, a snow leopard.
Yeah, I talked earlier about, a lot of new wave of British metal bands had to make a choice. Which way you going to go? Jaguar very, very quickly chose this path. Like we said, Power Games was recorded in late 82. They were working on it in the studio in November of 82, came out in March 83. Later in 1983, they did a recording session at the BBC. Typical thing back then where bands would get invited in to record about 4 songs, get like a half-hour spot on Radio 1 to showcase what they were doing. So maybe 6 months or so, I don't have the exact date for the BBC session, but sometime later in 83, Jaguar went into the studio, did that. None of the songs from this album were featured. And the songs that are featured, I swear to God, they are just the most insipid, fluffy, bubblegum, cotton candy pop rock you could want to hear, which is exactly what then they recorded for Roadrunner on this time. It's really hard to stress how absolutely toothless that material is on the second album. It's like, think of any bad mid-80s movie you ever saw in a theater that needed those kind of like, happy, fun, yay kind of songs to play while the final credits were rolling. That is the second Jaguar album. Every damn song sounds that way. It is amazingly bad, and how quickly they went down this path, and it was the wrong choice for that band. It killed them instantly, and sure, they got another album out 30 years later or something. It took that long to get the taste of this time out of their mouth. So yeah, the correct answer is all the songs on this album are superior to everything that they were doing even just a few months after this album came out. But if we're getting back on track for this album, favorite track, definitely Dutch Connection. I think it's a great opener. It's powerful, forceful, great way to open the album. There's no song on here I really dislike. I do agree with Kellen. The running order could be better because, and some folks mentioned it in the chat earlier. The album does feel like it kind of, loses a little steam as you get into the middle part of it. Run for Your Life is one that's never stuck with me great. Prisoner, I think, is a really good opener for side 2. But the combination of Ain't No Fantasy and Raw Deals, they're okay, but not the strongest. If I'm going to pick a least favorite, it will be, I guess, Raw Deal because of the length. It's not anything that's wrong with the song, except it just way overstays its welcome. There's nothing about that song that says you needed 6.5 minutes to accomplish it. You could have cut that song in half and had just, a really solid track. You would have had room on the album then to include an updated version of Act Crazy and have one more ass kicker on the album, which would have helped out for sure. But it didn't play out that way. So no real stinker on the album. But Kellen is right. It's not consistent start to finish. You've got some good tracks, but it loses a little steam along the way. I don't know if late in the recording and writing process were they already starting to think, hey guys, maybe we should trade in our denim and leather for some, Jane Fonda type of, sweatbands and
20-minute workout.
I don't know if they were sort of losing interest in this style by that point. If they, just had to cobble a couple of songs together to fill out the running order. Not quite sure what happened there. Still think it's a good album at the end of the day, but Kellen's points are fair. It has its inconsistencies, but I'll take Dutch Connection as the best. And Raw Deal just gets flagged. It gets the yellow card for being just a little too long.
All right. Well, for me, Dutch Connection is a close second favorite for me on the album. The main riff kind of feels like cross between Motorhead and Venom. It's good, sleazy, hard-hitting rocker. Very memorable chorus. Out of Luck, The Fox, No Lies, which I do like that song. In The Prisoner, they all kind of bring the energy. All good songs. Master Game, as we talked. Ballad Aspirations. It works for the band. They're okay at it. But the song breaks back into into the fight with that full-on guitar and for the chorus. It's like I mentioned earlier, it's a bit of a different song for the album, but it kind of shows that the band wanted to break it up a little bit. But I will completely agree with you guys. This album is very front loaded. The second, Prisoner, I think has a really good, like, oh, they're starting off side 2 with a banger. Great. But the song, there's some repetitive stuff going on with the riffs. It kind of it overstays its welcome for me. But my favorite track on here is Cold Heart, whether this is them turning towards Pyromania. I think it's a great closing track. Definitely more of an emotive feeling in both the music and more melodious side of Paul's voice on here. He's doing a good job singing on this one. And I really like the bass line. It's doing its job, helping to further lift the guitar progression. The guitar progression isn't anything fantastic, but that bass is doing the extra time to give it a little bit more life. Yeah, and the whole thing, it gives the song more space and emotion when he's doing the bass line. Before they put their heads down with that hard driving, that they just, you could hear they're just beating on the just that hard driving down picking on the strings. It's definitely my favorite. It's just the most emotion on the album. The other songs, they sound fine. Good.
The album does start well and end well, if nothing else. They have a good opener and a good closer.
With the closer, I'm hearing a little bit of something different from the rest of the album. I don't want to say that's an indicator that they're going to shift towards that second album, but it just feels like they're ending on more an emotive note that says, hey, these guys have got more tools in their shed that they didn't really use much. You know, you could tell there was a lot of beer drinking and tale telling leading up to that last song. And the last song hits, it's like, oh, there's still elements of the beer drinking here, but you know, maybe they're sad that the hot chicks have left. I don't know, but it's just a good ending for the album for sure. Let's talk about Judgment. Final thoughts, Alan.
Again, I have a lot of history with the album. It's an old favorite, and I agree with the criticisms that have been brought up tonight. It's not perfect. It's got its issues, but at the end of the day, I still enjoy it quite a bit. This was the first week, I'd played it in quite a while. It's one of those albums I don't really need to take it out and replay it very often. I've heard it a lot over the past several decades, but it still holds up pretty well when you take it out and play it. Marty, I think you made the point earlier. It's a fun listen, even if it's not a very complex or, deep kind of listen. So for me, it's one of those like strong kind of, like B plus, 8.75, 8.8 out of 10 kind of albums. So I like it. I still own 2 copies of it, so it can't be that bad.
Kellen.
So for someone who's not a true collector of the new wave of British heavy metal, I think this is like an okay listen, but more importantly, I guess the success of it is like its failures are interesting too. Like its failures tell a story in terms of like a time period in the history of the genre. Like, I think that's kind of made it what interesting for me this past week. Is there's sort of the clear things that like, it's not just like, oh, this song's terrible, but it also is like a confused band in a time period in which they're sort of straddling 2 different worlds within heavy metal in 1982, 83. And I think that was kind of made it an interesting listen. Like, even if you don't pick up the record, I think for me personally, at least, where I learned to dislike it, I think proved to be an interesting conversation about where the genre was in this time period in history. So I probably have floated past this record in terms of listening to it in its entirety, like a bunch of times since I first saw Alan sort of show it off 3 or some years ago. So to dedicate a week to it. I don't know necessarily if I would like go grab it. I don't know when I'll listen to it again, but there are a couple really, really strong tracks here, and one hilarious track that I will forever remember associated with the band.
Chicken in the bread pan, picking out dough.
And we've had a lot of fun with it, Kellen, but I do know what you mean. Sometimes when you make that goofy connection, there's just no redeeming a song. There's one old Overkill song, and every time I hear that song, for some reason, my brain automatically sets it to a square dance beat because the lyrics fit the cadence perfectly. Just for the swing your partner, do-si-do, blah, 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 waffle shoe, kick you when
Right.
you're, you know, stomping on you with my boots. It fits it perfectly, and I can never listen to that Overkill song.
My buddy Jason, I was listening to Symphonies of Sickness, and he's not a metal guy. And the song Ruptured Imperialance comes on, you know, the dun 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 dun, and then the pitch shifter. Dun. He's like, that riff there sounds like Banana Fana Fofana. And I'm like,
Uh-oh.
do not ruin this for me. Now, every time that fucking song comes on, I'm like, Banana Fana Fofana Papana. It's like, oh, God. I know what you're saying, is what I'm saying here. All right. Who went? It's Logan's turn.
Yes. So I hope everyone kind of gets the idea that I didn't bring this album to the table for it to be like a undiscovered masterclass of, you know, metal or a case for a hidden gem within the NWOBHM scene, you know, that puts Maiden and Priest to shame. To me, this is a really just an excuse to talk about this scene. And honestly, for the reason that you were kind of mentioning, Kellen, like I enjoy listening to these albums and these bands for that reason. Like, what worked, what didn't work, what are they pulling from, what aren't they, you know, pulling from, what could they have done, you know, differently to maybe make more metal. Or there's so many different stories of bands not succeeding from this scene. It's interesting to hear those albums and, you know, those band stories and see what they did wrong. Like, you know, this album, for example, and
Everything. They did everything.
This time they fucked up. That's what they did. And for me, this album is something I would pull if, you know, you're familiar with the A tier of the NWOBHM scene. You've heard, you know, Maiden through Diamond Head and Angel Witch and even a Raven or two. And you're now like starting to get into the B tier list. This is like one of the first albums I would pull would probably be Power Games. And I'd be like, this is a good, you know, example of not only what else is out there in the NWOBHM scene, but maybe a good representation of what it was at its core. Just, you know, a bunch of, you know, disenfranchised youth from Britain drinking beer and writing quick, fast songs for the sake of it, really. And I think it's a fun album. It is very, to me, well balanced. They go a lot of different areas. It's engaging to listen to. And yeah, it's something that I always return to, not like a ton, but enough where, yeah, I wanted to pull it and I wanted to hear your guys' opinions of it. So this was a fun episode. Alan, enjoyed your very well done take on this album and this scene for sure.
Oh,
so
thanks. I'm glad I could jump in and help out tonight. It was fun to do it.
But yeah, for me, not quite a masterpiece, but a flawed album that I think is fun to listen to and worthwhile if you're getting into NWOBHM deeper than the first level. So this is like an 8.6 for me, and I always enjoy it when I pull it off the shelf.
What did you say? What was it rating?
Oh, an 8.6.
Oh, 8.6. Wow. Did everybody go except for me?
I believe so. I think we're down to you.
All right. Well, for me, this is a solid, fun record. Definitely worth listening to. If it was on at a party, I'd be psyched about it, but it's not one I'm going to track down. I just don't foresee myself ever in a mood to return to this. I look at it as very much a product of its era, a little late in the era. And, you know, it's a very small fishing boat between two very big waves, which, you know, if you want to attach a name to the waves, you know, Saxon and Motorhead. It just feels a little bit late, too little too late for me. But again, it's still enjoyable. I feel comfortable giving it a solid 6, and that isn't trying to make it sound bad. I just think it's a little unremarkable. Fun, but unremarkable. And again, yeah, that's that. And thank you, Logan, for picking it again. It's been a treat checking this record out this week for sure. And Alan, thank you so much for joining us and filling in for Jim. I knew you would bring some insight to this one. Yeah, for sure. And who's picking next week for next week?
You had really wanted to pick something for when Jim was there last week. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I've got it
Okay.
right here. I couldn't remember if it was me or somebody else. Is it my turn?
Well, it was originally going to be my turn, but you were like, "I got something." And
No,
we're
no,
like,
no,
"Okay,
go
Marty."
for it.
No,
It's here. It can wait. It can wait.
We talked about it last time. You get to pick. You get to pick this week. The order doesn't matter because you were excited to pick it while he was there.
Hey, Jim's going to be there too. So.
Yes.
Yep, he'll be psyched about this one too. We're gonna do Celtic Frost's
Oh.
Magnum. Their art piece. They finally got an art piece after all their toiling and being lost and confused. Monotheist by Celtic Frost, their final album before Martin passed away, and this spirit was carried on in Triptychon moving forward. But yep, Celtic Frost, Monotheist. Was that what you were thinking I was going to pick? No clue.
I had no clue. I know how you feel about that record, though.
Oh, I listened to it the other day. I'm like, God, it holds up. It holds up. But yeah, does anybody have anything going on in their channels that they'd like? I know Alan just dropped a video yesterday with I watched it. I don't
A
remember
very
it.
weird rabbit hole to go
Oh, the
down.
rabbit hole. Yeah, the Sisters of Mercy rabbit hole, which was killer.
Yep.
Yeah.
A lot of folks are liking that Decrepacy album.
It sounds sick.
Also,
Yeah.
It's really good. I've only played it a couple of times.
You got a promo
because
for
I
that?
got distracted trying to figure out that stupid cover song.
I need to listen to more promos apparently.
But yeah, folks are having fun picking that part. Some folks have added some really good information in the comments on that too, about some like different variants on First and Last and Always and stuff. So if anybody watches it and finds it interesting, make sure you go through the comments. A couple of pretty hardcore Sisters fans have chimed in with some really helpful and useful comments, which I really appreciate them taking the time to do.
And also, Sisters of Mercy fans, check out the Sisterhood, which was his break with the guys that went on to form Mission UK. He was pissed off at him, and they wrote, Eldritch wrote the Sisterhood. It sounds like Sisters of Mercy, a little more lo-fi, way more lo-fi, but great music, great era. You know, England really rocked it out of the park for goth for sure. Kellen, what have you got coming up? Anything new?
I don't have anything on my channel. I do have a couple of reviews lined up here. So when we shut down tonight, I'll chat with these fine gentlemen about some upcoming collaborations that are becoming.
Oh shit!
Up.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah.
You're still racking up a ton of views on your Polish black metal review too, which was really excellent.
Yeah.
That video went over really, really well, which was great because you did a fantastic job with it.
Yeah, I'm very, if anyone who's tuned in and watched it, so thank you so much. Yeah, it's done pretty well.
Logan, you got something brewing? You're about to drop?
I do. Hopefully
he's going to drop that copy
tomorrow.
of This Time, because that shouldn't be there.
Hey, it's a good joke record. We got to have some of those.
You knew someone had to have an example of it, and I'm glad it wasn't me.
Logan doesn't have much vinyl, but what he does sucks.
Thank you, Goodwill. And
thank you, Goodwill. You give yet again. Yes, I suckle from your teats. Yeah. Anyway,
hard to follow up that. Subscribe to my channel, everybody. Vinyl updates.
Vinyl updates and cat buttholes.
No, there's a video up about, hopefully up tomorrow, about 2005 albums that I think millennial metalheads would have gotten into, Between the Buried and Me being one of them. So check that out for those interested.
Right on. Well, for show notes, there's no review this week. Just didn't get around to shooting one this weekend. I got some other stuff that is pressing going on. Alan, I will not be here Friday, so Alan decided, thankfully took the reins, so you guys have a show on Friday. What's going on Friday, Alan?
Friday, I will be joined by Aaron, the metal theologian, and Jürgen over in Germany, and we're going to talk about heavy metal, 1970s style heavy metal, though. So actually kind of working backwards from Jaguar and talking about what was considered heavy metal from 1970 up to 1979. We'll be stopping before the new wave of British heavy metal actually hits. So, expect a whole lot of 70s kind of material. And a big thanks to Aaron and Jurgen for signing on to help with that. Because I had one idea and I had just 2 people in mind to help with it. If they weren't available, it was going to fall apart real fast. But yeah, it's going to be a real fun show. The thumbnail looks very different, so you might glance past it if you're just kind of skimming for things to watch on YouTube. I had a little fun with the thumbnail.
Place your bets. Who's going to show a Kiss record in my absence?
We'll try to make sure.
Maybe nobody.
Throw them in.
Yeah,
I'm sure they will get mentioned. I'm sure.
All right. Well, that's it, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Great night tonight. Good crowd as always. Go check out our Discord server. Link in the description. Please go subscribe to all these fine gentlemen's channels. Links for everybody is in the description. We appreciate you. See you next time. Cheers.